Hi everybody, I'm Charles Reeve and I want to welcome you to our new Project Insulin YouTube channel. And in this inaugural episode, just going to talk a little bit about what is Project Insulin, who's it for, a couple of key ideas that are going to frame our conversations over the coming episodes, a little challenge that I've set for myself that we'll use as a kind of starting point for the next couple of weeks or months, and a little bit about strategies, kind of looking forward to some other topics that we'll talk about later on. So first of all, what is Project Insulin? It's a little thing that I've put together that brings together two key aspects of my life. One is that I have been a type 1 diabetic for over 20 years now, since the fall of 2000, and also that I'm professor and associate dean at OCAD University, which is a large, well-established art and design university in Toronto, Canada. And it just started to occur to me a little while ago that managing living with insulin-dependent diabetes while you're a university student can be very, very challenging, because you have so many transitions in your life that you need to manage, and getting used to also being responsible for managing your condition is just one more thing on top of everything else. And it does tend to lead to people in that age bracket feeling isolated, feeling out of touch, feeling helpless. And it really seemed like maybe we could do something to help folks deal with that. So Project Insulin has started as a student peer support group for students living with insulin-dependent diabetes. And this YouTube channel is just sort of a complement to that, to help continue the conversation and maybe broaden it to other people who also might be living with the same challenges. So that's what the project is. Who's it for? Really, it's for anyone who is either pre-diabetic or living with some form of insulin-dependent diabetes, or if you know people who are pre-diabetic or living with some form of insulin-dependent diabetes and you're providing them with support. Could also be for you as well. Really for anybody who's interested in, concerned about this topic, wants to know more about it, and wants to be in a conversation about how to manage our condition, and what are things that we can learn from each other to really make our lives easier. So a couple of key ideas that will really kind of focus our conversation over the next little while on this channel. So the first one is that it's really important for people to understand that my situation is not your situation. So I'm going to talk about some things that have worked for me, and I hope that those might help other people as well. But I also want to hear, I hope we can have other people come into this conversation and talk about what's worked for them, because as we know, depending on your diet, your level of activity, your body type, your lifestyle, all of these things can factor into things that you need to consider in managing your condition and living with insulin-dependent diabetes. So no two people are exactly alike. I'm certainly going to talk about some things that have worked very well for me, and I hope that they will work well for some other folks also. But ultimately, you know your condition better than anybody else, and you know whether these suggestions are going to work for you. And you may have some comments to feedback to me that then we can also talk about here, about things that have worked for you as well. So that's number one key concept. Second key idea, what exactly is insulin-dependent diabetes? What exactly are we talking about? So diabetes at its essence is very simple to understand. It means that your pancreas is no longer functioning at its regular level or at all. And why is this important? It's important because one of the things that the pancreas does is creates a molecule called insulin. And insulin is very important because it's what allows nutrients to transition out of your bloodstream and into the rest of your body. So when we're talking about insulin-dependent diabetes, we often use the punctured fuel line analogy, which is to say, if you imagine a car, everything in the car is perfect, except it's missing a fuel line. So you can put gas in the gas tank and that's fine. The motor works great, the transmission, everything, but the car won't go because the gas doesn't get from the gas tank to the motor. That's what's happening when you don't have any insulin in your body. And so the solution, in a nutshell, is very simple, although it took a while to figure it out, how to make it work, but it's to replace that insulin that your body's not producing with an exogenous form of insulin through injections or an insulin pen or, as in my case, an insulin pump. And then that creates this kind of important thing that really governs how you manage your condition, which is the balance between your diet, your insulin use, and how much activity you're getting. And it's the kind of relationship between those three pieces that really governs, for most people, how well they can manage their condition. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about insulin-dependent diabetes. And two key measurements that are important here. So one is the idea that you'll hear talked about A1C. And so A1C is a test that can be done every 3 to 6 months for insulin-dependent diabetics. And what it measures is the percentage of hemoglobin proteins in your bloodstream that are coated with sugar. And so this is important because it really tells you how well you're doing over the longer term, not just over the last 24 hours, but over a period of 3 or 6 months. How well are you doing at managing your condition? So if you're an insulin-dependent diabetic, ideally you want that number to be well into the 6s. So in my case right now, it's around 6.4, which is actually a little bit elevated for me. Over the last few years, it's generally been around 6.3, so it's a slightly elevated, and I have some theories about that, which we will discuss. But really, if it gets up above 7, that's when it can start to really have an impact in terms of complications around diabetes and things like that. So that's one key measure. The other key measure, and this is the last concept that I want to talk about, that's become very important to me, is a thing called time in range. So what does this mean? It means that I have a great system where I have a constant glucose monitoring system, which means I have a little transdermal sensor that is updating every 5 minutes, telling me what my blood glucose or what my interstitial glucose level is. And it gives me a readout that also updates every 5 minutes about how much time over the last 24 hours has my blood glucose level been within a healthy range. So this is very, very important because that innovation has really enabled me to get good control of my health and get to the point where I really understand how my condition works and what I can do to control it. So over the last 7 days or so, my time in range has been around 95%, and actually over the last 14 days and now over the last month, it's been around 95%. So that's pretty good, but we'll get to what I want to do next, and this is really what I am trying to, I think, talk about in the first couple of episodes in this series. So one of the things that happened when I got onto this new system was I realized that I could see how very quickly my time in range, at first it was like 45% over 24 hours, and then it was 50%, and then it was 55%, and I could see that I was getting better and better control of my blood glucose over an extended period, 24 hours, 48 hours, all of that kind of stuff. And I had a theory that it would be possible to get to a point where I could have 100% time in range for a full day. And it took me a long time to get there. And I remember the day that it first happened, it was like the last day in the world when I should have hit 100%, because I started out going for a long bicycle ride, like 90 kilometers, which almost certainly should have taken me low, but it didn't. And then I ended up by having beer and pizza for dinner, which almost certainly should have taken me high, but it didn't. And I ended up with 100% time in range for that day. And that made me realize that it could be done, and that it could be something, could be a target, that how often could I do it. And it took about 6 weeks for me to do it a second time. But now, I have to say, any given week, it's highly likely that at least one day will be 100% time in range. So that made me think, what's the next challenge? And it made me think, what's the maximum time in range that you can get for 7 days? And I theorized that the highest you could probably get over 7 days would be 99%. You could never get to 100% because once a week I have to change my sensor, and that usually takes me offline for about 3 hours. So 99% is the highest that you could get to. And so that became my next challenge. Can I get to 99% for a week? And back in November, I did that. And in fact, I kept it at 99%, not just for 7 days, but then for 8 days, and then for 9 days before I wasn't able to maintain 100% time in range for the full day. So that's become my challenge now is, can I get that rate of time in range a second time? Can I get back to 99%? And if I can, how long can I sustain it for? Can I sustain it for 10 days? Can I sustain it for 2 weeks? So that's the challenge. And what I'm going to really talk about in subsequent episodes is how am I doing with that challenge, but also some of the strategies, and this is maybe the more interesting thing, some of the strategies that I've started to use to help me really maximize my time in range, and in doing so to help me control my A1C levels and really minimize the risks of complications. You know, all of the things that we hear about, problems with neuropathy that affect your vision, affect your feeling in your extremities, all of that kind of stuff can affect your heart, your kidneys, so on and so forth. So strategies that I am using that I have found have been really helpful in terms of maximizing my time in range, maximizing my control over my condition, and that I hope will take me to back to 99% time in range for a week for a second time. So that strategy piece is really going to be focused over the next couple of episodes. There are going to be some nerdy things like a little checklist that I use every day to check off how I'm doing on some key indicators, but also some recipes that I have found really helpful, some activities, stuff like that, people that I'm talking to, and so on and so forth. So that's really what it's going to be over the next little while. Following me on this journey, we'll have a conversation about things that you're working on, that have worked for you, that maybe I should be trying, and maybe some of the things that I'm doing will be helpful to you. And together we can have a conversation about really moving all of us ahead so that we can all take better control of our condition and all do better at living with insulin-dependent diabetes.